Hi, my name is Bill, and welcome to another installment of Guiding Lines. And it's our recurring feature, Growing Up Comics. This time I'm going to talk about a favorite part of my Growing Up Comics, a long lost part of comic news and commentary called the Comics Buyer's Guide. Um, Comics Buyer's Guide, I came across was when I came across it, I was like in high school. I was like 15 or 16, maybe even younger. I don't know, probably younger than I really needed to be. But I spent my allowance and got myself a subscription to it. I don't know where I heard about it. Probably through like uh, letter columns of like the comic books I was reading. Like, yes, I read in CGC that this artist said this about this title, and yes, that's true. That title is canceled. Stuff like that. If you're like, okay, well, this is a way I could find out stuff that's going on in comic books before it happened. Um, and I signed up for it. Before I go to my personal stuff about it, I'll give you a brief history of the newspaper. It was essentially like the comic books world for a long time. New York Times. It's newspaper. It's its news system. It's like all kinds of stuff like that. Um, I Uh, it started back in just like I did back in 1971. It started a little earlier than I did. It started in June, and it was created by a man by the name of Alan Light. Uh, the first issues of the title were essentially a kind of like a clearinghouse, if you will, a like a like a way for a comic book marketplace kind of thing. It's people would send their ads in. Hey, I have like Action Comics, 276, $2 each, to people as if you want anything, send your want list to this email address. Not email, snail mail address. Email didn't exist back then. What am I thinking? Um, and so on and so forth. And people would like comic book companies across the country, comic book retailers across the country would put an ad in and tell what comic books are for sale, and people would go in there and buy it. That's how it started at the begin with. But eventually, to get a cheaper rate on postage, they started adding some editorial content. They added a letters column where fans could talk to each other about the across the country could talk about the world of comic books, and then they started bringing news segments into it, um, and it became like kind of like more of a magazine, a newspaper for comic books. It covered like news and had articles and stuff like that. Um, Alan Light left editorship in 1983, handing the reins over to a couple named Don and Maggie Thompson. They were a kind of like a pair of comic book collectors and very talented, gifted writers. So they became editors of the book and uh, kept it going. I think Maggie was there until the final uh, the shutters came up on the actual Comics Buyer's Guide. Towards the final years, she was aided by Brent Frankenhoff, I believe, and John Jackson Miller. But nonetheless, she was like the main person there. But it was her and Don until 1994, where when Don tragically passed away at the age of 58. Um, you know, so Maggie's still around as far as I can tell right now. Um, like I said, I came in the 80s, and like it was basically like I kept on getting into for a long time, well into like for like well into like the 2000s. Um, for me, it opened up a whole new world to me. Um, I was a relative novice, still learning about the comic book industry and comic book culture and comic book collecting. Um, this provided me with like opened my eyes to like just people all over the place. There's like um, people in other like countries even collecting comic books, and they have opinions on comic books, and some of them sure like mine. I remember like I think when I signed up, they had a special deal where if you sign up for a subscription, you got a free copy of Amazing, not Amazing, the Saga of Swamp Thing number 21. Now, as most hardcore comic book creators and readers and collectors know, this is the story, the anatomy lesson. This is it wasn't Alan Moore's first work on Swamp Thing. That was the issue before, but that's basically like clearing house and rearranging deck chairs. Um, this was his first in earnest new direction for the character. It featured like a change of the status quo for Swamp Thing. It's a very big key, a historical key, and I got it for free for just signing up for Comics Buyer's Guide. I'll always remember that. I wonder how many people in the world got their first copy of Swamp Thing that the same way. Um, but um, but what I got was like you got everything. It was like doing with it's like I say an actual newspaper. It came out weekly. The postage schedule it was monthly from 1971 to 1972. Then it went to biweekly from 1972 to 1975, and then it went weekly from 1975 to 2004, and it changed over to monthly after that. And I'll get to that in a minute or two. But it came to your door, and it gave you everything you need to know about the world of comic books. Um, the letter column, was filled with comic book creators coming in there. Mike W. Barr, Jan Strad, the infamous Name Withheld letter, which was later revealed to be, I believe, Eric Larson. It's started a whole war in the letter columns about war between writers and artists. Um, about like the writers don't need the artists don't read writers, and writers saying art alone does not make a comic book. Fascinating times. Really, really, really interesting to see that play out over a whole letter columns segment. But more than that, you'd find out like when new releases came out, when titles were canceled, when new artists were coming on here. Usually before it actually happened in real life. This is before like we had previews or the internet or anything like that. This was a way of getting like an inside look and a behind the scenes look at the world of comic books, for me at least, um, on a weekly basis, delivered right to your door. Um, and also had other stuff. It had like columns and features and stuff. It said "The Law Is an Ass" by Robert Ingersoll, which is basically took comic book stories that dealt with. He was a lawyer and dealt with stuff that took place in a courtroom and see how accurate it was. You had Tony Isabella, a comic book writer who created Black Lightning. He did Tony's tips. Basically, he reviewed stuff and like say which ones are which. And I'm sorry about this. This is bugging hell. I hope it's not bugging you. I'm just gonna leave it there and try to ignore it. Um, like stuff. He also did a segment called "I Covered a Newsstand," which basically involved him covering like mentions of comic books in magazines and other documents that you might find outside of like the actual comic books themselves. Like if Time Magazine did a little blurb about Neil Gaiman, he'd say, "Hey, you might want to pick up the next issue of Time because it has a little blurb about Neil Gaiman." You had Heidi MacDonald, one of the biggest names and best names, most interesting names in comic book journalism. She had a writing here. She was one of the few people who actually worked for Comics Journal and Comics Buyer's Guide, I believe. And she also worked for DC as an editor, I believe, at some time. And around there, she's still writing today at the Beat website, Comics Beat. So she's still around and like one of my favorite writers. I love reading her. Kat Yarnwood, Mark Evner started there. Peter David had an article in there. Mr. Silver Age, I think Craig should. He went a deep dive into comic books of the Silver Age. Educational for somebody like me who like was born after the Silver Age ended, pretty much. It's just so amazing. It's so packed full of news and columns and quality comment. It was like I used to devour it. It was like like sit down and you sit on the floor and just like read through it and just flip through it. For the most part of my collecting, the time I was getting it, it was a kind of like a long sheet, broadsheet newspaper, which was folded in half for mailing purposes and put it in there. So you put it in half, like the front page would be on half of the thing that's folded over. Then you open up and the story would continue, and then you open like a normal big newspaper from that point on. um, which I thought was pretty cool. Um, and they also had the comic strips in there. Mark Morton had a really good strip in there. Fred Hembeck had a strip in there for a while. Um, you know, and a whole bunch of other like artists, like and comic book, like who went on to make comic books, and some just like retailers who had a talent for drawing and stuff like this. It was so. It was. I have so many good memories about this. It made me a more rounded collector, a more rounder comic book reader, and more rounded like understanding of the comic book world and comic book medium. It showed me that the creators are human beings instead of like people to be idolized. They're not like made in some kind of factory someplace. They're human beings who have mortgages and stuff like that, and opinions, and and all kinds of stuff like that. Um, it's pretty comprehensive. It was like the internet today in a newspaper, and that's probably part of the problem that happened with it. Um, it was kind of like it suffered um, two from a two-punch combo that kind of like sent it reeling. First was the internet, where you get all the comic news that they covered in here. Now you have another access to it through the internet, through websites and through different like Bleeding Cool and stuff like this. But instead of getting it on a weekly basis, you got it on an hourly basis. Breaking news stories would happen as soon as they happen, and you'd be able to like follow it in real time as it went through. The Comic Spires guy could not compete with that. Another thing it couldn't really compete with, but it was in competition, was Wizard magazine, which started in the 1990s. This was more of a slick, glossy magazine that had a price guide in it that was kind of like a mover and shaker in the industry. It was a kingmaker. It'd be able to make a book hot by just by giving the push in the book. Um, but a lot of the newer fans migrate to that, and it's kind of like, you know, like to put in like the crudest comparison, Comics by Guide was the New York Times in its glory days when it was actually good, and like Wizard Comics was like the National Enquirer. They both covered the same topics. They're both there, but this was more glossier and glitzier and more kind of like, you know, you know, done with less of a sense of. I don't want to say professionalism. That's not really the right thing like that. It's more looser, more freer, more like tongue in cheek way, which really resonated with customers. Um, but like this kind of like put like a little hamper onto Comics Buyer's Guide. Comics Buyer's Guide was always kind of struggling with this because it was basically based on had to be based it's most of its income on subscriptions. A lot of comic book stores around the country um, didn't want to carry it because even in its news and article and column days when I was into it, it still had a whole bunch of ads for comic book dealers in there and like how much it's selling stuff for. And the comic book retailers didn't really want to have a the fellow says inviting the competition into their house to sell their wares, um, um, like and taking custom away from them as it sits there on the shelf. Um, I never saw this because you know what if some mail order person in a newspaper is taking customers away from you, your problem is less to do with the Comics Buyer's Guide and probably something to do with like how you're running your business. Either your prices are too high, your customer service is too low, or you just don't have the stock in that they need. Um, uh, that's my attitude towards that, and that's my hot take. So write it down. But like eventually, like even back in 1992, it moved from the like the big like Jenga kind of like origami newspaper broadsheet into more of a tabloid, more compact. It's all no folding necessary. You just pick it up and start reading it. Um, and then the size of it got a little smaller to save some money. And then eventually in 2004, they moved over from being the weekly newspaper to being a monthly magazine. I think it was like partially glossy, partially black, like newsprint cover, like paper. Uh, Introduced a buyer like a price guide into it, and and for me when that happened, like it was kind of like I knew that like like the time was up for Comics Buyer's Guide. Um, and I'm not saying this in a good way and like I'm gloating, like I'm happy about it. I was like really sad about it. It actually went on to last for 8 or 9 more years after this. So I was surprised that it lasted that long. But by moving to a monthly magazine, it put himself in direct competition with Wizard, which was also a monthly magazine. Uh, I mean, the sizes were different. You got more bang for your buck from Comics Buyer's Guide because it was the size of a regular magazine, and Wizard was more of a size of a comic book, but thick. Um, but it was like it was trying to out Wizard. It's trying to be another Wizard, basically, in my opinion. And there was already a Wizard there. You know, um, if to kind of kept the newspaper thing going and like try to make that more of a thing, and try to push that and try to expand that into being something completely different from the Wizard, like to make a true alternative. It might still be around today. Who knows? But the fact that it moved to try to become like more newsstand distribution, less on ads, more on like uh, bought price guides and stuff like that, and like that doomed it because it essentially was everything that Wizard was. Why would you want to go to Comics Buyer's Guide in this new format when you already had Wizard that you're getting already, and this all the things that this does, only you've been reading it already. Um, so that kind of like I think like started the slow lingering death of Comics Buyer's Guide, in my opinion. Hot take number two. Um, but eventually, but it did last, and it did last for another 8 years. The last issue was in, let me see here, March of 2013. It was they announced its the cancellation with issue 599. Yes, they couldn't put out one more issue to make 1600, a big, nice, even round number anniversary issue. They canceled the issue before, just for basically there. By this time, like it's monthly and stuff like this, and it was like kind of you could tell at the end was nigh because they're putting out like these books, like listicle books, like the 50 hottest comic book babes. I'm like, why? It's like they became like the meme with Steve Buscemi. Hello, fellow kids. It seemed like they're trying to be hip and happening, but had no idea actually how to be hip and happening. They also had like I think like 50 or 100 badass characters, and it's like ooh edgy, ooh babe, like half naked babes, like anti-heroes, put them all together. Ooh, this is the new Comics Buyer's Guide, and like nobody wanted it. I remember when they put out those two books. That's like I said, like another nail in the coffin for them because like they're reaching for something they're not going to get. Um, but like so, eventually when it came out of business, it was more of a mercy killing than anything else. The Comic Buyer's Guide that actually uh, published its last issue barely resembled the Comics Buyer's Guide that I fell in love with. Some elements are still there, but it was just like it's just too much. Like the specialist was gone. The and granted, like I said, like it was hard for them to compete with the internet and with Wizard. As you know, like they kind of like I couldn't think of a way to do it, and they tried whatever they thought was best, and eventually they left this mortal coil. But there's like even today the people like I don't know if many people actually realize that Comics Buyer's Guide actually exists and how important it was. It had its own Comics Buyer's Guide fan awards. It was the place where news broke and controversy developed and discussion and arguments happened. It was vital. It was alive. It was a pulse of the comic book industry, but done with like less snark than the Comics Journal, and like kind of like more of a appreciation for its past than say something like Blizzard. Um, and it's missed. I missed by me, and I don't know if anybody else misses it. If you have fond remembrances of the Comics Buyer's Guide, um, let me know in the comments. What was your favorite section in it? What was your favorite artist? Your favorite columnist? What scandal do you remember breaking in it? What news stories do you remember breaking in it? Do you remember it at all? Do you even realize it happens? Um, if you haven't heard about it all and you want to find out more about it, there's a comprehensive yet not complete sampling of the Comics Buyer's Guide and the Buyers to Comic Fandom on uh, on the Internet Archive. I'll try to put a link here in the description for you all to find out that for yourself. Uh, you could read like see how it was when I was a young one, and find out how it was to find comic book news breaking the week it happened and stuff like that. It was an exciting time, and if you want to take a look at it for historical purposes, it's all there for you. Um, I don't know if it's going to be there forever because I don't know if it's like not exactly public domain, but I don't see anybody else coming out with any kind of compilations of back issues of Comics Buyer's Guide. So we'll see, but get it while the action's hot. Um, if you like this, if you like me talking about the Comics Buyer's Guide, hit the thumbs up button. It's very easy to do. It's free. It doesn't cost anything, but it's helpful with the overall YouTube algorithm. It'll let them know that people are actually engaging with the content that I'm making, and also give me an idea of like, okay, this has X number of likes. Do more of this. People want to see this. People like this. Um, if you do like this and you want to see more of it, I do. This is the growing up comics is my way of going back memory lane and remembering stuff that I grew up reading, watching, hearing about, living through. So hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified of every time a new one comes up. And also, when my other features hit. Um, but until then, I just want to say, rest in peace, Comics Buyer's Guide. You've been gone for like over a decade, but my memories of you still remain. Until next time, keep collecting.